It's your words. Your words drive your stories, and the story you tell yourself, that's your mindset. When we add in what words to use less of and why, and what words to use more of and why, mindset becomes practical. They're wasting my time. I dare you, take out the they, put in I. I'm wasting my time. That is a completely different picture. It's a completely different set of emotions, and you're going to do different things.
Hello and welcome to the Consistency Project with E.C. Sinkowski. My name is Patrick Cummings, and every episode I have the privilege of having a discussion with EC on subject matters that range from nutrition to fitness to the choices we can all make to live a healthier, more functional life. By exploring both the principles at play and the actions worth carrying out, as a result, it's our goal to get you thinking, get you moving, and get you taking more consistent steps toward optimizing your well-being. Thank you for tuning into the show this week. I'm here with a quick introduction because we have a conversation that EC had recently with a gentleman by the name of Mark England. I met Mark a while back when he came on the Chasing Excellence podcast and talked to us about the power of words and stories and breath. And I really loved what Mark is up to, has been up to, and is specifically up to with his company. It's called Enlifted, which you can find at enlifted.me. He's helping coaches of all stripes work with clients to harness language and self-talk to become more productive and empowered. I was excited to get Mark and EC into a virtual room together so that they could talk about Mark's approach, and specifically so they could talk about Mark's approach as it relates to nutrition, which is exactly what we've got lined up for you today. Before we get into it, if you want to learn more about Mark and what he's up to, go to enlifted.me. We've put the links in the show notes, including a link to the Soft Talk Challenge, which Mark and EC discuss in this episode. Before we get into it, one quick reminder: if you are not yet subscribed or following the show wherever you happen to find it, please do. That will ensure you do not miss another episode, and it will ensure that I sleep well at night. So thank you in advance. Here is EC and Mark England.
Well, cool. Thanks so much for joining the Consistency Project today, Mark. I'm really thrilled to talk with you because we're going to talk about something that I get asked about all the time and I don't have the expertise for, and that's the mindset of nutrition. So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. And then, for mindset, so you went out and found yourself a former MMA fighter, elementary school sports teacher to come to come in and talk about mindset. Okay. Well, guess what? I can. I know. Well, I heard you on Chasing Excellence with my good friend Ben and also Patrick, of course. And I was thinking to myself, wow, this really would be a great fit with a lot of the questions that I get. And while I believe in, understanding the importance of thoughts and identity, it's just certainly not where I have expertise. So that's what we're going to hopefully scratch the surface with a little bit today and get people exposed to you and how to start thinking about this stuff. So, I think I just wanted to kick it off sort of with just laying the groundwork of understanding how important you think how we identify and the thoughts and the running stories through all of our head is to achieving the outcomes that we want. Yeah, it's kind of sort of important. Take out the kind of and the sort of, being able to take those running stories and turning them into walking stories. You ever thought about that? Which definitely brings up the rate of speech, the how fast the story goes. Everybody is super important in as far as your ability to make changes to the story. Okay, or let's pretend you're a coach. When you're working with your clients, and we're talking about the mechanics here, everyone. This is very reliable. The faster the story goes, the harder it is to change. I'm going to say that twice for effect. The faster the story goes, the harder it is to change. So the faster someone is talking or thinking, very reliably, the higher their breath is in their chest. And when the story is going fast, it's called amygdala hijack, if you want to get all that about it. Look it up. Also known as sympathetic nervous system response, also known as a stress response. When someone goes into a stress response, and most people's stress responses are induced via the story that they tell themselves, also known as mindset. So this is what we do. I've been researching, presenting, and coaching, and now certifying coaches on the power of words and stories for the past 16 years. And most people's language is working against them. Unbeknownst to them, this is an education issue. It's easy to fix if someone wants to. And so when someone goes into these upregulated stress states, and their breath is trapped in the chest, and the words are going very fast, whether it's out of their mouth or in between their head, it's super hard to get a bead on what's happening because we get consumed with the emotions of it. The stronger the emotions and the feelings, the more believable the story is. And there's a big difference between being in our story and being able to observe our story. So the great Alan Watts, who in my personal and professional opinion is the greatest teacher of Zen the West has ever known and will ever know, he said, when we learn to think about our thinking, we become alive in a new way. And most people are not thinking about their thinking. They're just thinking. They're just going with it. And so I'll give ourselves some credit. We've done a very good job, everybody, of simplifying the conversation around mindset and also gamifying it. So people can play around with their words. Your mom told you don't play with your food. Mark England is telling you to play with your words. And it's so much easier to do once they're written down. More on that later. So let's get the definition of mindset on the table because it's important, or our definition. And in the mindset space, most people that talk about mindset they don't have a definition for it. It's this big, and even if they do, it's this big picture philosophical thing that takes a while to explain, and then good luck implementing it in the gym, okay, or in a conversation with your family, or helping yourself talk yourself into a better mood. Here's the enlifted definition. The enlifted definition of mindset. It's very simple. It's the story that you tell yourself. Your mindset is the story that you tell yourself. And that story, it's the story you tell yourself to yourself, about yourself. It's the story you tell yourself about what you can do and what you can't do, and what is possible and what isn't possible, and what you do deserve to have and what you don't deserve. And a lot of that, those are opinions. Those are just ideas. Nothing ever works out for me is not on the periodic table of elements. These are not facts, right? These are ideas that get set up at some point in time in our story, in our history, in our life. And most of the time they run behind the scenes and sometimes in front of the scenes, unchecked, unbeknownst to us. Carl Jung said it, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life and you'll call it fate. And oh boy, can we do some very interesting things with a pen and a piece of paper. Yeah. So also known as dismantling the victim mentality. That's kind of, sort of. There's those two words again, important. Soft talk, folks. We'll get to that. EC, I can go in a lot of different directions. You know your audience.
No, that's super helpful. I mean, I like the idea of the speed. The speed around the story is probably going to indicate how much that's taken a hold of the outcome, right? If you're so quick to say that's just not for me, or I'm not successful at that, it's almost even more sure you're not going to get to the outcome. And so you just kind of said there at the end, victim mentality. And I know that's really woven into all of these stories in a lot of ways. And I think there's a lot of different definitions or beliefs about what people think victim mentality is. And so can you shed a light on how you approach, defining victim mentality, as well as who could be subject to victim mentality? Because I think there's many people who you probably speak to who know that, who come to learn that they are using victim mentality, although they maybe wouldn't identify themselves that way at first.
It really helps when we're having a conversation about mindset, a holistic conversation about mindset, to include the definition of the victim mentality. Okay. And everything I'm sharing about the victim is, this is just such good news, everybody. Yeah, there's a little bit of sting involved, especially if you want to change it. And by the way, that's nothing compared to, wrestling with this thing for, just 30, 40 years, it getting in the way of your dreams, you feeling the way you want to feel, breathing well around the people that you love, also known as having good relationships. 80% of having good relationships with other people is breathing well around them, oddly enough. And so this, and that's the thing that people care the most about once the conversation has been articulated. They want to resolve the feelings of not being good enough, also known as a telephobia. Okay? Or the fear, that's what that is. A telephobia is the fear of not being good enough. The imposter syndrome. These are all flavors of the victim mentality. The victim mentality's got more flavors of ouch and pain than Baskin Robbins does. And so this is not my definition. This is the definition of the victim mentality. I'll do it twice. Most people have never heard the definition of the victim mentality, much less written it down. So everybody, if you've got a pen and a piece of paper, I invite you to put pen and paper to this for a very good reason. It puts you in an exclusive club of someone who's written down the definition of the victim mentality, and you'll get a better ROI on your time listening to this conversation. Here are the numbers: 30, 50, 80. We remember 30% of what we hear, 50% of what we write, and 80% of what we teach, share, or explain. Okay, so I'll do this twice. The first time slow, the second time I'm going to speed it up and put some polish on it, and then I'm very happy to get into those sentences that you sent over, things that people say. We can what's called translating. We can translate some of those and talk about the how people can change some words and have an experience for yourself. So I'm taking a pinch out of the middle. This is the definition of the victim mentality. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. The victim mentality depends on a habitual thought process and attributions. That's the verbatim definition. A little bit faster with some polish. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends, it's a tendency, everybody. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. A person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. The second sentence, the victim mentality depends, underline that word, on a habitual, circle that word, thought process and attributions. That second sentence is gold. The victim mentality depends, as in it has to have a habitual, which accurately implies duration and addiction. Thought process. What's a thought process? Glad y'all ask. Everybody has one. It's how you put your words together. It's how you use your words. That's your thought process, because your words equal your sentences and your sentences equal your thoughts. Okay, none of this stuff is rocket science. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to understand it. And then attributions, that last word at the end. What is that? It's characteristic. And the main, besides the words, the main characteristic that we pay attention to, which is directly related to someone's rate of speech, is breathing. The faster someone talks, the less they can breathe. And when someone is breathing poorly and talking quickly, they're in that amygdala hijack. This negative feedback loop gets set up. And so when someone's breath is in their chest, their listening ability tanks. Your ability to listen goes way down. You lose access. Literally, you lose access to your peripheral vision, and then also your creative faculties. So your ability to problem solve your way out of a scenario, or be creative and see other options, goes way down in context to how worked up we get ourselves with our stories. And we've all got black belts in working ourselves up in context to our stories. And when we learn more about what words force us into creating the victim mentality. And this is not victim blaming. I am very aware of the social climate. Let's get this on the table real quick. This is not victim blaming. This is victim mentality explaining. There's two completely different things. And some people, oddly enough, there are some people that want to change the meaning of what the thing of the experience that happened way back then. Let's say it was a divorce when they were 9, and after 25 years of feeling like it was all their fault, even though there was 9, and they've got to take, and so dad walks out, and then mom's this emotional wreck, and I'm the only one in the family, so now mom, I'm going to take responsibility for mom's emotional status, and then I get that thing in place, and then I walk out into the world, and I'm on edge, and I'm trying to make sure everybody else is okay and leave myself as a complete wreck, and that's how this stuff happens. Here's another example. I was working with this woman recently who said, I've had the same relationship with 5 men. When I was young, my father cheated on my mom, they got a divorce, and I grew up hearing, this is not me, this is her, hearing, you can't trust men. Can't trust them. Can't trust them. Don't trust them. Can't trust them. And I mean, total shocker. She walks out into the world as an adult wanting to have loving connections. And then she's got this story in the back of her head. You can't trust men. And so she goes into her adult relationships and she doesn't trust them. Okay. And some people get tired of those old programs running. And the words are a big part of that. So you mentioned different ways people can create the victim mentality. So there's 3 pillars of language that people use to create different variations of it. Okay, we'll talk about projections first, we'll talk about negations second, and we'll talk about soft talk third, which is the gateway drug to the rest of your language. It's super easy to, right? Bringing back all these 1980s dare, like remember that stuff? I do. I'm 47. Yeah, and so in that order.
Yep.
So there are she needs to respect me more. If I say that, regardless of whether or not I'm tired of feeling like a victim of circumstance and regardless of how much I might want to take responsibility for things, if I say that, here's what I'm getting, everybody, because 2 + 2 = 4. She needs to respect me more. I'm getting the victim-villain dynamic. She's in the picture. I'm in the picture. She's doing something to me again, and that puts me into a stress response. And then in my imagination, I have to wait for her to change so I can feel better. Don't hold your breath, everybody, even though you are, because that puts you in a stress state. Or my dad always talks to me like a child. I dare you. Take out my dad and put in me.
So in those 2 examples, those are both examples of projections. And this is one of the ways that people can identify when they are using victim mentality is by
Correct.
Putting this projection on this other individual, the dad in the last example. Okay.
Yeah, that's a second stage observation. Just here's the easiest way to know if you're very likely creating victim-centric stories is if you're upset. If you're chronically angry, chronically resentful, chronically bitter, I'm just gonna say it. I promise you, projections are in your language, and that's the last place we want people to start. Because that's where, she did that to me. He never lets me live my life. So the key words are he, she, they, people's first names, mom and dad. Let's throw the government in there. And then, and that creates overt victim villain mental imagery. And if that plays out long enough, remember the definition of the victim mentality, habitual thought process, we get addicted to it, and the projections, that's where if they're left unchecked, that's where the bitterness lies, and that's one of the strongest emotions that people have. It's right below shock, in my opinion, and so we'll get to those things, everybody. Let's wade into the water, Okay.
Yeah.
So projections, that's where the strongest emotions are. And once again, so dovetailing back to something I've said, the stronger the emotions, the more strongly someone believes in the story. The more strongly someone believes in the story, the more attached they are to how the words are put together. Okay, this thing, it all works together. So we'll get there later. So projections, 1. 2, negations. My grandmother was a 3-time Olympic gold medalist worrier. She was as good as they get. She would just worry, and I would observe this when I was young. I was like, man, that's wild. And she was using a lot of negations. I don't want you all to have problems in school, and things can't keep getting worse, and I'm not happy with what the neighbor's doing with it over at their yard. And so the nots, here are the keywords: nots, can'ts, won'ts, isn'ts, shouldn'ts, haven'ts, hasn'ts. I was working with a young man, this is 2014. I got brought in to do a training for a sales team in Calgary, and did the workshop, stayed after, did one-on-one sessions with everybody. And he and I are in a room, 2 chairs facing each other. And he goes, Mark, I can't keep focusing on my past. I was like, and he got very upset. He was very upset. And I asked him, I was like, I gave him a pen. I said, write that down. And he said, what? The sentence, I can't keep focusing on my past. Pen to paper, because it's so much easier. This is another important point, everybody. It's so much easier to think about your thinking when the words are written down. It's 1,000 times easier to think about your thinking and then change out some words once they're on paper. They're ping-ponging around in your head. That's tough. Flying out of your mouth. That's tough. Okay, pissed off and zipping off the end of your thumb on a text thread. That's tough. Get them on paper in order to look at your words. Okay, this is different than journaling. Journaling, 98% of journaling is write out a bunch of things, and half the time it's a net negative, because it's just there. Okay, there's the proof. I've got it in writing. No, when you write things in order to draft them, just like in high school, now you're talking about a completely different kind of practice. So he wrote down the sentence, I can't keep focusing on my past. And I said, if that's what you can't keep doing, because that forces him to stare at what he doesn't want, also known as stressful. If that's what you can't keep doing, what can you start doing? And he had to think about his thinking, which was hard for him until it isn't. Okay. Living with this stuff's way harder, by the way. And he said it like it was a half sentence, and it went up at the end, up talk. Focus on my future more? And I said, yes. Now say it as a full sentence. And it was like he was learning a new language. You hear the breath start to loosen up, very important. I can focus on my future more. I lived in Thailand for 10 years. I used to teach kids how to speak English. It was like he was learning to use his language in a new way. I can. And then he talks himself into it. I can focus on my future more. And then now that we're pointed in the right direction, I said, cool. What can you do? And he said, I can read these 2 books. I can sign up for, this is a true story. Sign up for the mentorship program, and then everybody goes out the first Tuesday of every month, and they go out for drinks, and it's all the best sales. And he did, and he messaged me 9 months later, and he said, hey, I things are different. I'm making money. I moved out. I'm feeling great. Thanks. 1 sentence, a pen, a piece of paper, 1 sentence. And so that can take a little bit of mental gymnastics to go, okay, if that's what I don't want, what do I want? And if that's what I can't keep doing, what can I start doing? And if that's what isn't possible, what is possible? Okay, cool. So we have projections. That's where that real ouchy stuff is. Stay out of that for later. Save it for later. Then you have negations, a little complicated sometimes. Then there's soft talk. I think I might want to possibly Change my lifestyle habits. You ever heard somebody say something like that?
Once or twice.
What? Hear with sarcasm, everybody. And did they?
No.
No. The chances that they're going to do that or anything that they use a guess and a might and a kind of and a sort of and a hopefully and a try and a possibly and a perhaps, every word, every one of those words that goes in there, the anxiety goes up, the indecision goes up, and the likelihood that they're going to take action goes way down. It's called soft talk, everybody. And it's the place you start. It's the gateway drug because there's only a handful of words and you just take them out. And when you go from, I think I'll make it to the gym today, and you take out the think, I'll make it to the gym today. That's a big deal. Or I might be avoiding talking to them. Take out the might. Or I think I'm drinking too much coffee. If you think you're drinking too much, you're drinking too much coffee. Take out the think and own it. So and if not, these things are going to stay at finger's length. And it goes both ways. Identity goes both ways. When someone practices indecision for a period of time, because it is a practice. Okay. Eventually, you'll identify yourself as indecisive. And when someone identifies themselves as indecisive, they get better at being indecisive. It's the same thing with, like I said, it goes both ways. Consistent. You practice being consistent, and eventually you go, wow, man, I've made a lot of progress. I'm really consistent. You're going to get better at being consistent. I'm late all the time. You practice being late all the time. Once you identify yourself as a late person, whoops, you're about to get even better at it. Or being punctual, or following through, or not finishing anything, whatever. And guess what drives that stuff, everybody? You'll never believe what I'm about. It's your words. Mm-hmm. It's your words. Your words drive your stories. And the story you tell yourself, that's your mindset. And when we I'm calling it, everybody, when we add in what words to use less of and why, and what words to use more of and why, mindset becomes practical. This is where the conversation about mindset is going, because the big picture, philosophical, stoic stuff with the next layer of neuroscience, which is cool. All that's great. And how do I stop telling myself that they are wasting my time? They're wasting my time. I dare you, take out the they, put in I. I'm wasting my time. That is a completely different picture. It's a completely different set of emotions, and you're going to do different things.
My friends, we'll be back to the conversation between Mark and EC in just a moment. But first, I wanted to call your attention to something that you may not know existed. The 800-gram challenge ebook. You've heard us talk about the 800-gram challenge about a bazillion times here on the podcast. But you may want to go even deeper. You may want to get some tips on how to start and how to do things like go out to a restaurant. How do I go out to a restaurant and still keep on track with my 800-gram challenge? Well, EC has collected all her best advice in this ebook. She's got practical tips, as well as offering some of the pitfalls that she has seen people fall into as they try to make this happen. You can learn more about the ebook at optimizemenutrition.com/800G-challenge, or even easier, just tap the link in the show notes. You will get there. I highly recommend you get this ebook. Okay, back to the episode and the conversation with Mark.
That's why I wanted to have you on, because I do think that's not only identifying some of these conflict language patterns, the soft talk, the projections, the negations, help somebody understand how their mindset's working against them. But then also you do have some good strategies that we're going to talk about. It starts with maybe writing it down, getting the breath under control, that we're going to talk about with some examples that I think show up in my practice. But before we get into that kind of practical piece, which I definitely want to get to, I just want to get your sense of why, if somebody knows that they would be better off by going to the gym or eating more fruits and vegetables, why is this conflict language and this habitual mindset so seductive? Why is it so compelling to be caught in this story? Why do we keeping ourselves in this, I don't know, wheel?
Yeah, there's great question. One, what's more seductive than our own voice in our own head? Okay, that's arguably the most seductive thing on the planet. Oh, it's my own voice in my own head. It must be true. All these thoughts of chaos and destruction and depravity, and yeah, let's go with them. That's part of it. Part of it is a lack of education. Most people's education about their language comes down to spelling, grammar, and definitions. Very few people, that's an understatement, have any courses, classes, or even conversations in, let's just say, high school about how to use their language to stay focused on what's important, keep the drama down, and build up their self-image, okay, and feelings of confidence, competence, and deserving what they have. That's part of it. The friend circle is a big deal. Okay, who are we associating with? If it's the gossip table, in order to sit at the gossip table, you got to gossip. You got to bring some dirt. And if their friend groups are telling similar stories of ouch and pain and sting and woe and why nothing works out for them and why they can't do something because of their genetics, and that no one in their house wants to make any dietary changes, so that means they can't, and that other people are holding them back and all that stuff. If your friend group is telling yourself that story, you all are drama bonding. And if the emotions and feelings get strong enough, you're now trauma bonding, and people get addicted to it. People get addicted to it on a social level. People get addicted to it and maybe someone's addicted to the sympathy of it. Okay, they've got this story of, woe me, and that's how they interact with the world, and they'll find people to go, oh, that is just awful, and get sympathy, and that's how they get their attention. People will do anything for attention. People will do anything for attention. I used to teach kids. I'm a human being. I understand, and I've done all this. I get it, right? I have a shadow. It's like I understand this stuff on a personal level, on a professional level, and on a social level. The kids will. The most dangerous thing is the thing that scares kids the most is being ignored. Okay, that's why kids act out. Okay, preferably they'll get good attention. Okay, if they're not getting any attention, they'll act out in order to get attention. Okay, because that's what the thing needs.
It's good to understand why these things are seductive, because I hear that a lot. People will talk about kind of self-sabotage and they know better and all that stuff. So it's good for all of us to know, why do we keep telling ourselves these stories? Okay, great. Yeah, let's dive into a couple different examples. I don't know that we're going to get to all of them, but I'd love to maybe take a couple at least and see how you would start working with somebody who's telling them the story. And maybe the first one that we could start with, because I definitely see this one, is identifying as a stress eater. So when I get stressed, I just eat. I can't make better habits because I'm so stressed out, and I just need to eat and I feel better.
Take out, stop eating. So once the words are on paper, and I'm looking at she sent over 5 statements that she hears. Once the words are on paper, and so when we coach people, most of it's done virtually. This is important. Most of it's done virtually, and it's done off of a Google Doc. So let's just say you and I were working together. You would have a Google Doc. We both have access to it, and we would get the problematic stories also in sentences and words, because that's what the build on paper. So then we can both look at them. And if it was a Zoom call, I would hit share screen and we'd be looking at the same words at the same time. And we would adjust those last 2 words. Or we'll take out the can't. Take out the can't and put in don't. Yeah, because can't.
I get stressed,
exactly.
I just don't stop eating. Mm-hmm.
What happens when we take out the can't and put in don't? What does that imply?
It implies a little bit more of self-ownership of it.
Correct. Agency. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now we've got here's what we started with. When I get stressed, I just can't stop eating. To when I get stressed, I just don't stop eating. Okay. Now scratch out the just.
When I get stressed, I don't stop eating.
What happens when we take out the just? I've got an educated guess, and what happened when we did that on your side of the street?
I think it makes it less absolute, or even, I guess, even more agency. It's not so obvious of what's going to happen, I guess. It's not so absolute.
Those are other ways of saying that the drama comes down. I just want to do the whatever. Take out the just. I want to do, right? And so now we've got, when I get stressed, I don't stop eating. And so for this, take out stop eating and put in breathe.
Yeah, change the focus on to something else, right? When I get stressed, I don't breathe.
Correct. And when people don't breathe, they don't like the feeling of it. That's called being uncomfortable in your skin. And if someone has, so I forget which one's which. The second and the third most commonly purchased over-the-counter medications are indigestion medication and constipation medication. And me and a handful of MMA fights and all the dodgeball classes. So know who you're listening to, folks. I'm a very simple person. In my personal and professional opinion, the reason for that is because people's breath is trapped in their chest. When people's breath is trapped in their chest, you don't digest well, you don't poop well, all the other stuff tanks too. And the reason why people's breath is trapped in their chest is because of the stories they got going on. And so when someone's not breathing, that's people don't like feeling like that. That's very uncomfortable. And if you are unaware of what's driving that and how to turn the volume down on that, then you're going to go do your thing of choice. And for some people, it's Krispy Kreme in the middle of the night. Okay. For some people, it's happy hour. For some people, it's excessive spending. The amount of addictions out there, those are Band-Aids for breath trapped in the chest. Because when someone is in a down-regulated parasympathetic nervous system response, don't I sound smart? They're breathing low and slow. They're comfortable in their skin. They're zoomed out. And it's like, okay, cool. I'm here and I feel me. So that's one way. That's one direction we could take that. There's a variety of them.
I like that point when you were talking about the story with the man who said he just can't stop thinking about his past or whatever it was. And it's like, well, exactly. That's why you keep thinking about your past. And so the same sort of thing here, that we had to take it off that I just can't stop eating. We have to start thinking about what we're going to do when you're stressed as opposed to just stop eating, right? So yeah. What about another one of, this one is a difficult one when people are trying to make good lifestyle changes, but their partner is maybe not on board to do so. And so, I'll give tips to my audience a lot about, hey, if you binge on certain foods, just don't buy them, right? Keep your home environment clear of your triggers. And that's great for people who might live by themselves or have a supportive partner. But sometimes I hear, hey, nobody else in my house wants to eat healthy, so I can't make these good nutrition choices. I can't keep it out of my house.
It's easy to understand, and there are challenges implementing it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And then you got to look at like, well, what's harder? What's harder? Picking up that pen, changing some words, changing some beliefs, some actions, or doing the same thing over and over again. You got to pick your poison. Okay. So is it the nobody in my house wants to eat healthy, so I can't make good nutrition choices? Okay. EC, please read that in its entirety.
Nobody in my house wants to eat healthy, so I can't make good nutrition choices.
Perfect. Again, there are a variety of different ways to take any sentence. And if we had been working together, I would have figured out what works best for you as far as the combination of words. So this is me just making taking some shots in the dark, everybody. So one thing we could do there is to scratch out nobody from nobody all the way to so. And so the first word, correct. Correct. Let's get them out of the picture just for a hot second. Okay. And so what happens when we take that first part out and we have, I can't make good nutrition choices?
Ownership transfers from somebody else to yourself. Yeah.
Perfect. And then I'd play around with the words. Take out can't, put in could.
I could make good nutrition choices.
You hear how she inflected on that? Could. I could. Could, when used consciously, it puts a lot of things on the table. It socializes ideas, and people are like, oh yeah, huh. And make noises like that. It's called a cognitive shift. Huh. I could make good and then I would just put the word some in front of good.
I could make some good nutrition choices.
Now put more after some.
I could make more good nutrition choices.
Yeah, I could make some more. Some more. So it helps them give themselves credit for what they're doing right now. And yeah, I could. And you could take out could and put in can. I can make some more good nutrition choices. If you really want to take out the some and put in my, I can make my good nutrition choices. And if they're like, listen, my life is chaos after 9:30 once everybody is up and the thing's going. Okay, great. Breakfast. I can make my good breakfast nutrition choices. You own one meal of the day. Listen, everybody. Okay, chocodiles and ding-dongs and Hot Pockets and all that stuff. My breakfast is my safe zone. I'm eating what EC tells me to eat, and you all can do whatever you want to do. This is how things are. Put your foot down. And guess what? People will go, oh. And in a week, it's a nothing burger. And okay, I own breakfast. I'm just owning breakfast. And then once that's socialized, as in you're used to doing it, then you're like, okay, and then you pick a couple of lunches, and then eventually you got half of your diet's working for you, and that's way better than none of your diet working for you. Small word choices, they add up. Small steps. And this also comes down to calibrating your client. Okay, calibrating who you're working with, listening to how they're talking about their problems, dialing things in and out, seeing what sticks. Okay, so it's a process. There's a process to it. So, like I said, there's a variety of different directions that you can take each one of these sentences.
I did just want to highlight that point you said that I love you mentioned that this isn't necessarily an overnight thing, that these changes still do require work, and just because we're changing the mindset doesn't mean all of a sudden tomorrow everything's figured out, but just understanding how the language around it can be affecting your habits. And I talk about habit change and small habit change all the time, but just now recognizing the stories that we're telling ourselves around the habits is probably really the first step to then be able to make that habit change, right?
If you want to make things easier, okay, because there's going to be some elbow grease and some challenge involved in changing any habits. And a lot of times people make it way harder than it has to be. And the easiest way to make things way harder than they have to be is getting our words working against us. That whole abracadabra thing. Abracadabra. And this is old ancient knowledge. So abracadabra, when people hear it, they think magic. Cool. Guess what? It's better than that. Abracadabra is Aramaic, which is an ancient language, and it translates to with my word I create, or with my word I influence. You can look it up. The teachers they would triangulate it and wear it around their neck to remind them of the power of the spoken word, because they knew if their words are getting in their way, working against them, which most people's are, then things are going to be harder than they have to be. And what I'm here to help people do is to make things easier, okay? Because it's fun. This thing can be more fun than most people think. It doesn't have to be like pulling teeth. Okay, there's some challenge involved, and that's also relative to the payoff. And let's get in the ring. Let's get in the arena. Most people's language tricks them into being spectators in the stands. That is existentially terrifying.
Yeah, so okay, let's hit this last one. I should be better with meal planning, but I'm just so busy.
Take out but, put in and.
I should be better with meal planning, and I'm just so busy.
Take out just.
I should be better with meal planning, and I'm so busy.
So watch, the drama is just coming. Take out the word so.
I should be better with meal planning, and I'm busy.
Take out busy, put in productive.
I should be better with meal planning, and I'm productive.
Okay, she did it. That right there. That's called when your client goes, that means something happened. That's called a cognitive shift, a nonverbal cognitive shift. What happened right there?
That was really a feeling of taking charge, because once you now say I'm productive, you feel really empowered by the work that you're doing, versus busy feels almost like you're drowning.
Correct. I highly recommend taking out the word busy and putting in productive. Busy you're a slave to the thing. Productive, you're driving the bus. Okay. Busy is stressed. Productive is creative and authoritative, which you need to be authoritative in your life. You want someone else being authoritative in your life? No. You can totally do that with your words. You won't like it. I promise you. You won't like you. Let's just take out the it, and you won't like yourself. And no one likes themselves like that. We can get addicted to it, and change can be scary. I should be better with my meal planning, and I'm productive. And then so when you put in the word, like I said, we could have adjusted the beginning of the sentence. We can adjust we just adjusted the back end. When you put in the word productive, how does that frame meal planning now?
Yeah, I will be better with meal planning. It has to change from should, yeah.
It has to, because she has now framed herself. She's now identified herself as productive. Okay. Busy is frantic, things going everywhere, and kids and soccer balls, and you've frazzled, and you've 8 glasses of Merlot just not to, freak out at night. And productive. Oh, I'm productive. That means I'm organized, I'm strategic, and it only takes 45 minutes to meal plan. Well, yeah, okay, of course. Since I'm productive. You put some of the right words. Okay, let's go on a quick rant and tangent. I took my 5 nieces and nephews. I got 3 nieces and 2 nephews, and I took them. We have some property in the riverfront, and it's a very pretty river. It's the Slate River in the middle of the state of Virginia, and we went and waded the river. And this is about 3 years ago, and I got them right in the middle of the river. 2 hours in, and there's 2 hours out. So we're having an adventure. And I asked them. I set the whole thing up in my head, and it worked. I said, "How often do you hear adults use the word adventure?" And they just drew blanks. I lived in Thailand for 10 years. I lived in Ecuador for 18 months. I've lived out of a suitcase for a long time. It's an adventure over here. And the work I do, I find very adventurous. Get the word adventurous into your vocabulary and keep it there. And you'll like the energy it creates. Same thing here with productive. Get the word productive into your vocabulary and keep it there. And you'll like the pictures it makes. You'll like the energy it creates. And you'll like what you end up doing and not even having to think about doing it, because you got the right button in place. You got the right seed.
We've just really scratched the surface here with some of the techniques to use. I just want to find out a little bit more about where people can kind of go from here. Obviously, writing it down, studying the words, studying, where they might be using some of these either negations or soft talk. But I think you've got some resources available for kind of people's next step.
We've got 3 things. We have a podcast, and it was all about words and coaching with this stuff. Get in lifted. It's fun. Kimberly Kesting, she's fantastic. She'd be a great person for you to interview. She comes from a nutrition background. She's just delightful. Our website about the certifications. So what we do is we certify coaches or people that want to coach. They're already coaching. People want to get into coaching on how to dismantle their client's victim mentality, also known as getting them unstuck and unlocking what's in the way, because that's where 98% of a coaching interaction on a mindset level starts. Very rarely do coaches book in when the sun's out. No, it's like, hey, I'm struggling with this thing, help. And you know what, we teach people how to do that. www.enlifted.me, enlifted.me, and then there's the soft talk challenge, which it's 7 days free. Awesome. You get 7 emails, and it helps you with the thinks and the maybes and the mights and the sort ofs and the guesses and the kinders and the tries and the possiblies and the possibilities and the hopes, and helps you get all that junk out of your language. And once you start plucking that out, everybody, then you're going to feel it. And as the old saying goes, she who feels it knows it. And when you feel this, when you feel the difference between I guess I might possibly and I am, you're going to go, man, he was serious. I am. I'm also sincere, because I know what happens when you make some seemingly minor adjustments in your everyday, ordinary language. There's a lot that's downstream from that, folks.
I love it. Well, yeah, we'll put all of those links and resources for people in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really think it helps people start to stop going with that story so fast in their mind and kind of reframe it to change habits for a kind of successful outcome. So thank you so much, Mark.
My pleasure, EC. Thank you for having me on. Everybody, thank you for listening, your time and attention. It is noted and appreciated.
Thank you so very much for tuning into the show this week. Thank you especially to Mark England for the conversation. Again, if you want to learn more about Mark, what he's up to, head to enlifted.me. Links are in the show notes. The soft talk challenge that EC and Mark talked about, there's a link to that directly. One more reminder, if you are not yet subscribed or following this here podcast, wherever you are listening or watching, hit the little button thingy, and so you don't miss another episode. That would be wonderful. And we thank you in advance. EC and I will be back for another episode of the Consistency Project next week.